clerk will read out the names.
Hello and welcome to Parliament and Governance. It's always a pleasure to have you join us here on ITV. I'm Uyi Agmofwegbe. For this week, let's talk about the financing, for want of better words, of the legislature. The cost of maintaining, or if you like, funding the legislature in Nigeria. Many persons have talked about how that we are spending too much, all right, maintaining the legislature, which is, of course, a combination of the Senate and the House of Representatives. And then you're wondering, if we were to cut down somehow, by whatever means, on what it is that the maintenance, so to speak, of the legislature consumes, where does that leave us? Does it make us better off as a country, at least fiscally? Or are we just paying attention to the less important things at the detriment of the more important things, which should be of more priority to us in this country? That's what we want to find out on this week's edition of the program. Stay with me. My guest is Barrister Matthew Edagese. He's a public affairs commentator and obviously a lawyer as well. Matthew, thank you for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Great. You and I have talked about several issues around politics, leadership and governance in this country over time. But for this week, I want us to pay a specific attention to the issue of the so-called jumbo pay to federal legislators in this country. In what ways really does that impact adversely on governance and, if you like, infrastructure developments in Nigeria?
As much as there has been public outcry against the salary which they consider too bogus of the legislators,
right.
I would not want to restrict it to the national. Reason being that laws are made both at the federal and state levels. So if jumbo pay is the reason for the situation we have found ourselves in the nation at the federal level, how does one also relate that to the situation at the sub-national level, the state level?
Right.
Because we also have parliament across the system of federation. They are also making laws, they are also functioning, they are also paid salaries.
Sure.
Whether the salaries of the state legislators are jumbo is what I cannot reconcile with the reality on ground. If we complain that the salary of the national legislative members is the reason why there's a drain in the economy.
Right.
What about the economies of the various states are also lean? Or they are not doing well? Is it also traceable to the jumbo pay? I do know that what they pay at the state level is not jumbo by the definition of it. I do not think they are paying the state legislature jumbo pay. So if the lesser we pay, the better the economy. Why has that not reflected the economy of the various states?
But the question probably should be, why do we have more attention paid to the pay package of the federal legislators?
That is what I'm saying now. I don't know why their attention is zeroed in on the national. Perhaps their pay is reasonably too big.
Okay.
Comparatively.
Yes.
Compared to what they pay at the state level. But that is not my question now. My angle is this. If the jumbo pay, is the jumbo pay the reason why we're in the situation we find ourselves as a nation? The dwindling economic fortune, the lack of direction of the policy makers to a very large extent. I do not agree that that is the sole reason. What I believe is this. The jumbo pay become an issue because the output is not commensurate with the money they are getting. Assuming they were delivering on their mandate in terms of turning out wonderful legislation,
yeah,
and the economy is booming. The security situation is superb. There's serious, there's wonderful security policies or laws to guarantee security of life and property. One will now have been looking at the issue of probably looking at the issue of jumbo pay.
Yeah.
It's like you pay so much and you are getting so little. That is the quarrel. That is my belief.
You're not getting commensurate value.
Yes, for the money
you're spending
in them. So instead of focusing solely on how big or how too big their take-home pay is or allowances, I think we should have rather be focusing on whether they are delivering on their mandates.
Right.
In terms of the outputs. That itself is the area I have serious reservation. I believe they are not. I'm personally convinced that they are not delivering on the mandate commensurately.
There are people who are now saying, I mean, that's been on for a couple of years now, calling for part-time legislature. Do you share that sentiment on any level?
I am not of that school of thoughts. The America we borrow this system from, they are not operating part-time. So if we want to go part-time, we should be thinking of another model. Comprehensively. Should not be restricted to the legislature.
Okay.
It means every elective offices should be part-time basis. And I do not think that is workable under our climb, our peculiar situation.
Let's talk about something else. In 2012, former CBA Governor Lamido Sanusi had talked about how that about 50% of our recurrent expenditure went into funding and maintaining the National Assembly while he was delivering a lecture at a university. And that became a controversial issue. When you followed that story at that point in time, what lessons and what insights did you glean as to the heavy cost of governance in this country?
Sometimes I feel it is just a game of wits, and one arm of government trying to blackmail the other, or outwit the other, or outsmart the other. As much as there's so much hues and cries about the jumbo pay of the National Assembly members, nobody has bothered to look at the security votes, the bogus security votes
going to the governors
of the executive, yes, which dwarfs whatever we are calling jumbo pay. I think the jumbo pay kite is flown by the executive arm of government to reduce the strength and status of the legislators in the eye of the general public. They want to sound like the beautiful bride, because don't forget the legislators are they act as check on the executive arm, and the executive in this climb do not want to be checked. They want to operate like an emperor. So anything that will whittle down the power of legislators will be welcome and promoted by them. I think this clamor against jumbo pay is actually coming from the angle of sympathizers of the executive interest.
There are people now saying that, look, why don't we also take a look at issues, or if you like, variables like the so-called constituency votes or projects that ordinarily the legislators have no business with projects within their constituencies. Instead, they should be the ones initiating the project, advancing the ideas to have those projects cited, but not being involved in the execution to the point that they are now having access to public funds, taxpayers' money, by way of executing projects. Some people say, well, there's a political angle to the conversation. After all, if I've been at the House of Reps or the Senate for 4 years, there should be ordinarily and ideally some substantial physical tangible projects I've executed, whether street lights, whether a borehole, whether a healthcare facility, or a primary school of 6 rooms or classrooms, for example, within my constituency. Are we making sense with all of this madness?
I love the last word of your submission. The question you ask is an answer in itself. we are not making any sense. That arrangement itself is nonsense arrangement. It's highly nonsensical. First, the executive are supposed to be the organ of government that execute projects by their nature and constitutional provision. Where and when the parliamentarians now become executors of policies, that is where the aberration was anchored. Now they are complaining about the wastage that that whole idea RSS has become. The very question we should have, which is very fundamental, was when did the parliamentary organ of government graduate to be competing with the executive in handling of projects and execution of same? All this was put in place for reason of political patronage, which is negative, which has negative intent. The money actually is meant to placate or appease the parliamentarians by the executive, so that they will no longer be strict in overseeing, in the oversight functions of the executive organ. It is like a political, politically legalized bribery and a corruption arrangement. It is bribery, technical bribery. When the sentinel is now sharing from the meat stolen by the thief, you don't expect stealing of animal to stop in that territory. They will even encourage the stealing because they go to benefit from the consumption of the meat, of the free meat. So the constituency project, by its very nature and composition, is actually a gift from the executive, but to the parliamentarians. So this hypocritical cry that, oh, it's not properly utilized, it's not properly managed, is unnecessary. It's neither here nor there. It was never intended to be of public interest.
Let's talk about the motivation, all right, that pushes people to want to run for a seat at the legislature, whether it's the House of Reps or the Senate. People say, well, it's just about the financial benefits. That's the reason people do that. And then you're wondering, where does that leave Nigeria in the next 20, 30, 50, and 100 years? And
before I forget, this whole idea of constituency projects is pure tokenism. It's a misplaced priority arrangement. For instance, you're talking about street projects, siting of boreholes, construction of drainages. These are normal societal developmental projects that government should provide. Borehole will not be necessary if the water works are working. We grew up to meet water boards in this country. They take table water to your house. So it's because of the failure of the system that you now begin to see a parliamentarian who ought to have been making law. That is what you're supposed to be doing. You don't score a parliamentarian by the number of boreholes sunk in his own territory, constituency, or the number of street lights he brings. Street lights should naturally be there, provided by the government. And the policy they make, the law they make, will make that thing available. They don't have to go and execute it. They are to provide the legal framework for those things to be in place. They have failed to do their primary duty. Now they are skipping their primary duty to perform an abstract secondary duty, which is unnecessary if the primary duty was performed. If laws are made that every street, every road constructed should be fitted with street lights and modern drainages. So if the executive organ want to award road contract projects, all those features will fit into it for it to pass through the channel of approval. And they ought to have ensured that if such project does not have those accessories, it cannot pass for budget approval and all of that. They have control over. So how will they leave all of that and now begin to give token? Because they are going to eat from the pie. That is why they are encouraging. So
let's talk about the motivation for people wanting a seat at the legislature, for example. What motivates them? Is it beyond money, or is it because they sincerely have the interest of their people at heart to say, look, let's change the narrative for the better. Let's bring real-time development to our people. Is that always the motivation, or is it something parochial and just material?
this is a follow-up of what we have just discussed.
Right.
The motivation to serve the people is the it drives the performance of the elected office holder. If from what you are doing, from your outputs, from your conduct,
yes,
and utterances, you are pro yourself, selfish interest, then definitely you are not there to serve the people. And basically what we are suffering today as a nation, because public office holders are going there to help themselves to the treasury, not to apply the resources for the general good and the welfare of the people.
We're going to take a quick break at this point, because I know you still have some more to talk about on this issue. Just after this break, I'm going to ask Barrister Matthew Eddy, I guess, a couple of more questions on the show before we're done. Stay with me. So I was going to talk to you about the place of the people in all of this. We've heard about, for example, cases where, I mean, whether you like it or not, this boils down to quality representation, right? We read about cases where somebody represents a senatorial district, for instance, somewhere in the east, or if you like, a member of House of Reps from somewhere in the south, okay, not having an office, or if you like, a constituency office. All right, we think there are constituencies that they supposedly represent. Meanwhile, they spend their whole time in Abuja between their legislative quarters and maybe five-star hotels across the Federal Capital Territory. What can be or should be the role of the people in all of this? Should the people continue to be helpless about this sort of nasty and disturbing situation?
While one may criticize the non-availability of constituency office by some national legislators or even state legislators,
right,
the other necessary question should be, where those constituency offices exist, what purpose are they even serving
in the first place?
Yes. It's like having a car that does not move and not having a car at all. There's really no difference in terms of functionality. You don't use a car that is immobile. So those non-functional constituency offices are as good as non-existent constituency offices. Because what makes a constituency office useful is to provide a platform for interaction, communication, correspondence between the person representing the constituency, the elected office holder, parliamentarian, and the people, nobody constituent. So if that is not obtainable, the physical presence of that structure is useless. And if the channel of interaction is even there, the physical structure will also be of no moment. If there is a way, a medium of communication, constant contact, and free flow of information and exchange of ideas and inputs and opinions, and this opinion translates to the policy, the debate by the parliamentarian on the floor of the House, nobody will complain about absence of constituency office. For instance, the just passed that bill,
Petroleum Industry Act,
PIA. There was public hearing across the countries. The public made inputs. What eventually appeared at the end of the meal was different from what the input people made. There's no connection. The Electoral Act too. You are also hearing that the input made by the people, which was overwhelmingly in support of electronic transmission of results, ended up being thrown away on the floor by the same people who were sent on an errand to deliver on the mandate given to them by the people.
Right.
So basically, it is a question of them going there to represent their interest as opposed to the interest of their constituencies.
We heard people, as we wrap up now just in a minute, we've heard people say, look, let's review all of these issues about constituency projects and so on and so forth. Let the executive be the executive, let the legislature be the legislature, and let the judiciary be the judiciary. In fact, they're talking about pure and practical separation of powers. Do you see that possibility in 1 minute?
Separation of power is only possible when the political actors are ready to observe or play by the rules of law. When the rule of law is now jettisoned for the rule of self-convenience by elected office holders, then we will enter a situation that we have found ourselves now, where the law is suppressed to project the will of individual office holders.
Right. And
the system cannot make progress that way. That is even why we are making progress almost backward. The system, the law, rule of law ensures that everything functions in a way that can be predicted. Absence of rule of law means things will now happen or function in a way that the human being wants, the way of the power, at its whims and caprices. And should it become a tyrant or an anti-people-minded dictator or tyrant, then we are in for a very troubled time.
Okay, great. I was just going to talk to you about this. I don't know what your reaction would be, just for 30 seconds. The people are now saying, let's review this so-called presidential system of government, which they say we cloned from the US. All right. Given the peculiarities of Nigeria as an environment, is there any need to have such a conversation as to, look, let's review this presidential system, let's adopt something that works for us, something more like a homegrown concept?
When people are advocating for homegrown system, who will grow it at home, at the home front? When people who are supposed to be the ultimate holder of sovereignty will sit down at a public hearing and make inputs to a bill, and the people who are supposed to go and present the position of the people go there and do otherwise. So homegrown system will not be on autopilot. It has to be managed by human beings, human elements. If these people are highly corrupted and anti-social,
right,
whatever system you bring here will be bastardized when it gets to the implementation level and functionality. So the human character is more important than the system, because the system can be shortchanged by malevolent elected office holders or system operators.
Let's talk about legislation, or if you like, legislature at the state level, because for the most part, we're always more focused. I don't know where that tendency comes from, on the federal legislature. How are we doing at the state level as far as legislature is concerned? Is it any better than what we see at the federal level?
Why the emphasis on the federal level is that there is so much items on the exclusive legislative list, which drives 80% drive the system in terms of infrastructure, in terms of security, everything is loaded. So emphasis will be on the area where the bulk of the solution ought to have come from.
Right.
That is why the emphasis on the federal level. But for the residual list or the concurrent list that the state manages, which is very little, because there's very little they can do to change the reality or the fortune of the system, because 20% cannot alter optimally the fortune of 100% arrangement.
That's right.
Where 80% take the bulk of the responsibility. So no matter what they do, it cannot rub off massively in turning around the system. But if they do their maximum best in that their 20% responsibility, there will be some ray of hope and some shadow of progress, which they are not doing.
I think that combination will just make sense. Ray of hope, shadow of progress. Thank you so much, Barrister Matthew Edagese, for coming to talk to us on the program today. That's what we're leaving it, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'm Uyi Agumofwegbe. Bye-bye.